Alright guys, the next character coming up is going to be SP Hirugami, and we all know he is another GOAT just like SP Hoshimi Korai, and in fact the two of them makes an amazing combo together as well. But let's just go through his skill one by one and explain why exactly he's so good, okay? Now let's start off with his skill 1, which is actually going to be his best skill. So the first sentence just says he increased his block power. This can go all the way up to 60% if you actually have maxed out. And basically, if you take a look at his ultimate attack, which is skill 4, it looks quite low, but that's because it doesn't actually have the 60% from skill 1. So in total, if you actually add this extra 60%, it's going to be a lot higher than other characters' ultimate attack, okay? However, the next sentence or the next paragraph is the most important part of his kit, which is that when he's on the court at the start of each turn, if your player's block ultimate cooldown exceeds 8 net crossing, then that character's ultimate cooldown is going to decrease by 4. Okay? Now, basically, you actually have to separate those out into two different kind of conditions that they're looking at. The first one is the block ultimate is cooldown exceeding 8. Okay. However, the second half is that characters all of ultimate cooldown will decrease by 4. And what that basically means is that if you have certain character with 2 ultimate attack, one of them which is going to be blocked. For example, if you have SP Hoshimi Korai as skill resin 4, where he gets the ability that his skill 2, which includes the block, is going to become an ultimate attack. Or if you have the like of SP Suki, who has both skill 2 and also skill 4, which are ultimate attack, what's going to happen is that he would actually make both of those ultimate attack go down. Okay, so that's basically what makes him incredibly strong. And just in general, outside of those two characters, a lot of other characters would also greatly benefit from this cooldown reduction. For example, Kongo Gawa, if you can actually lower his cooldown, he can actually be using this to buff up your teammates a lot more. Same thing with SP Kuro. When he actually uses his ultimate attack, there's this kind of like guarantee thing where your next receive will not lose a point as long as your block doesn't lose the point. So there's actually loads of different gimmick which can be used a lot more frequently once you actually play them alongside with SP Hirugami. But the most important thing is that if you actually pair him up alongside with Hoshimi Korai as skill 4 or Suki, you're actually able to reduce both of the ultimate, both the spiking as well as the blocking ultimate down by 4 net crossing. Okay, so this is going to be a massive upgrade for them. And then even if your block ultimate cooldown is actually less than 8 net crossing, what's going to happen is that player's basic stats will actually increase by 15% instead. So it's still not that bad. Obviously not quite as good as reducing cooldown. However, 15% to all of your stats is still going to be very decent. Now, one thing which is not very clear is going to be what happens if the block ultimate is exactly 8 net crossing. That's something we'll have to test it out once it's actually out on global. Next, we talk about his skill 2. Now, unlike the UR version of Hirugami, SP version is actually going to get a quick attack as well. And in fact, if you actually take a look at his label, he does have a quick spiking label as well. So his skill 2 is going to be that quick spiking move. It's going to do a quick spike of 140% quick attack stat. So multiply is pretty low. And also, let's be honest, you're not going to be building him with quick spiking potential anyway. So you don't actually expect this to hit much. However, it doesn't matter even if his is not planning to actually use his quick spike, because what's going to happen is that when he actually uses his ultimate attack, what's going to happen is that if your spike is not actually on cooldown, what's going to happen is that you will actually use up your spike, force it to go down cooldown, go into cooldown, and then instead give you an extra 10% defense technique buff instead. Okay, and that makes it very nice because vast majority of the time you're not going to use him to spike anyway. However, this doesn't make him having useless skill 2, and instead his skill 2 can still be used to buff up the rest of his kit. Okay, so once again, this is actually very nicely designed. Even if you do not plan to use it, it will still passively buff you. Next, we have skill 3. So this is very similar to his UR version, which is basically the buffing he is able to provide. So when he's on the court, whenever you play a touch the ball, you're going to get 1 stack of this buff called roll swap, and each one of them is going to increase your own block stat. However, more importantly is at the end of each turn, you will actually be consuming them, and for each one of them, you will be increasing your attack and defense technique. Obviously, this can go to very high. I don't actually know, depending on how long the radius, what's going to be the average number. However, if you just think about it, this can be triggered every single time when you touch the ball, unless you do a serve ace, in which case amazing. But otherwise, if you do not do a serve ace, it's very likely you will be getting at least 5 touches because you have the serve, block, receive, set, and spike. So that's going to be 5 different touches you will be doing, and therefore that should normally mean a guarantee of 18% attack or defense technique, as long as you don't, either get surface or lose on the enemy first spike, etc. So this can also be very, very strong. 18% base attack and defense technique, which can potentially go all the way up to 60%. It's going to be incredibly strong and makes him one of the best attack and defense technique buffer as well. Now, at the start of the match, your ultimate is also going to further reduce cooldown by 2. So what's going to happen is that your ultimate is normally going to have a 12 net crossing cooldown. However, due to skill 3, it's going to reduce by 2, so become 10 net crossing. And then because of his own skill 1, because this is more than 8, you're going to further reduce down to 4. So actually, even though this says 12 here, in reality, this is actually just going to be 6 net crossing, which is actually very, very frequent considering how strong this one be. Now, obviously, I already talked about the skill multiplier. Even though this looks quite low, remember, you can add another up to 60% from his skill 1. And then furthermore, when enemy actually do a critical spike, which, to be honest, vast majority of the time, you should be facing enemy who are performing critical spike. I think right now in this meta, especially PvP, everyone should be guaranteeing critical spikes, to be honest. So you can almost assume this to be always activated, and in which case your reflex will increase by 100%, which basically means that he is going to guarantee crit when he does his ult block as well. Okay, so very, very nice. Now let's talk about his skill resistance too. When the enemy performs a critical spike, which I just said, it's very, very likely that he will be performing a lot, your cooldown would actually reduce by 2 net crossing. Now, this is actually a really, really important upgrade for SP Hirugami, because assuming the enemy is able to do at least 2 critical actions out of the 4 action they'll be performing. So remember, every single time when the ball come over to your side, you should be doing a block, doing a receive, doing a set, and doing a spike. So there should be 4 actions. As long as 2 out of those 4 actions are becoming critical spike, it's potentially, I mean, we need to check whether or not this stack, but it potentially means that you can actually reduce your cooldown by 4 net crossing. And remember, we can already reduce his cooldown to 6 net crossing. And if the enemy actually perform 2 critical actions and then therefore actually reduce it down to by another further 4 net crossing, then essentially you're actually able to spam his ultimate every single time. Okay, so this becomes really, really amazing. And even if this doesn't stack, you will be essentially forcing your cooldown to just 4 net crossing, and in which case your Hirugami can guarantee to ult every other turn as well. So this is definitely going to be very, very strong. And furthermore, when this happens, your spirit is also going to further increase as well. However, it's only for 2 net crossing, which basically means it's just for that particular block. Okay. Now, when the second half of skill resistance 2 is very similar to Hirugami, your version of Hirugami, which is basically this morale blocking surfing ability. Okay, so he will actually now have a surf ability now, which forces the enemy to lose 40 morale point and cannot gain morale for that one turn. So very, very similar to your version of Hirugami. Then skill resistance 4, when he participates in a multiplayer block, your players with block skills are going to further increase their basic stat, and your front row players are also going to further increase their stats as well. And then for every 1 stack of your role swap, which remember that's the one that can give you attack technique and defense technique buff, your players reflex and spirit would also further increase as well. So those are all really, really nice buff. Is it mandatory? Obviously not. However, there's definitely a big upgrade to his kit as well, just to make all of your blocks and potentially your teammates even stronger as well. Now, overall, as you guys can see, Hirugami is absolutely amazing, and his main selling point is actually just coming from his own skill 1, and that basically makes him very cheap for you to obtain because you don't actually need to get any dupes on him. So if you do actually have some spare resources right now, it's probably going to be more recommended rather than getting more dupes on Hirugami. You should just be spending your summons on Hoshimi Korai and try to get him to skill resistance 4, because skill resistance 4 for Hoshimi Korai is going to make this deadly combo with Hirugami skill 1 in order to reduce all of his ultimate cooldown by 4 net crossing. Okay. However, as a bare minimum, you have to make sure at least you get 1 copy of Hirugami first. Okay. So in terms of priority, the way I would personally look at it is that you have to guarantee you will be able to get at least 1 copy of Hirugami. So definitely work backwards from that. So have a think about how much gems you will be getting. Are you able to actually guarantee 1? And then whatever other gems you have left over, you can then choose to actually spend them on the current SP Hoshimi Korai banner instead and try to get him to as high up on the resonance as possible. Even if you do not get him to skill resonance 4 straight away, that's absolutely fine, because remember, there is actually going to be chain pack that will be coming every single time, which allow you to have the potential to buy an SP milk to dupe him up eventually, okay? So you don't even need to wait for rerun banners. You can just slowly build him up to skill resin 4 without the chain pack every single time. So that's kind of why it's going to be recommended personally to make sure you guarantee at least one copy of Hirugami. However, whatever surplus, personally, I wouldn't go any further to dupe him up. Instead, I will actually spend them to try to get dupes on Hoshimi Korai instead. Okay, so that's going to be my take on this new character. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section.